right, guys, we are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show where we recap every UFC. I am your host, Keith Shillan. I'm a writer for Sherdog, Cage Side Press, and am the executive producer of the Loudmouth Podcast Network. We are partnering with the Sherdog Radio Network, which I'm just going to say it right now. Also the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Okay, that's not an official title, but I just made it. Speaking of a very professional title, he is the senior editor. He is also currently the interim boss of Sherdog as Mike Fridley is on vacation. He, of course, is my co-host, Ben Duffy. Ben, I mean, are you feeling any pressure filling in for Mike?
Well, I wasn't until just now. Thank you very much, but... No, he is getting a well-deserved week of R&R with his family, and I am more than happy to hold down the fort as best I can.
Well, that's funny because you were just saying that like a minute ago. You were saying like, wow, this job is so easy. Like, why does he even need a break?
He's going to kill me.
So we are recapping UFC Vegas 4. This is the fourth event in a row at the Apex, closing up before we go to the very exciting Fight Island. But this was UFC Vegas 4, Poirier versus Hooker. I don't know about you, Ben, but I feel like I needed a day to recover from this absolute madness from the opening fight all the way to the last fight of just pure madness. Did you, like, last week we did it right afterwards because of schedules. Basically, my schedule, we couldn't do it right afterwards, so we're doing it the next night. Is that a positive thing? Like I needed that extra night.
If we'd done the show immediately after the card ended last night, it would have been just a lot of yelling and screaming. Basically, we would have been like just another announcer's table. I would have been happy to talk, but I wouldn't have been able to speak coherently about what had gone on. My thoughts were going in a million different directions. But I agree. It was just pretty much madness from start to finish. Some great fights, some really weird shit. So, yeah, just plenty to dig into.
So let's get right into it. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Dustin Poirier won a unanimous decision in an absolute slugfest, incredible fight. So, Ben, I am a sports fan. I am a diehard New England sports fan. Everybody can tell by my accent. I'm from New England. I like baseball. I like football, basketball. I love collegiate wrestling. But obviously, I do a podcast every week. In MMA is my favorite sport. And things that we saw last night in the main event just reminded me like how much of a gap that sport is to everyone else. Like I can't get that exciting in other sports than I was getting last night in a fight that I wasn't even rooting for either side. I mean, have you ever been that excited in watching other sports, or can you get that excited watching other sports?
It gets it's really, really rare. I can count the times. Obviously, watching the Astros win a World Series, regardless of what kind of light that's been cast.
Yeah, I was coming right to a joke.
By subsequent events.
Way to go.
But in the moment, I mean, it was just kind of a transcendent thing. You felt a part of something bigger with all the fans around you. It was electrifying. There have been a few things like that, a few boxing matches, but MMA will give you that just on a random card at least a couple times a year if you're watching enough of it. There's no other sport that delivers what MMA does as easily and as regularly.
Yeah, I always think with other sports, you need that championship on the line or you need this crazy rival. MMA, you don't need that. You could just have, in this case, it was a little bit of bad blood, but it wasn't like when we think about all-time rivalries, we're not going to think of Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier. But MMA, you could have just two guys getting in the cage and then, the excitement is crazy. I mean, I think about the most excited anticipation for a baseball game I have ever had was being a Red Sox fan. 2004, obviously the year they won the World Series, broke the curse. And Game 7 of the ALCS, I was so pumped up. They were down 0-3. They came all the way back, tied it up. And the Red Sox won, which was great. But the game was actually a blowout. The Red Sox blew out the Yankees. It wasn't that exciting. This fight heading in, everyone was like, oh, this is going to be an absolute war. Must-see TV. And what I love is when we have matches like that, and then they absolutely deliver. It's like every single time Dustin Gaethje steps in the cage, we say, this is going to be must-see TV, this is going to be incredible, he's going to knock him out quick, or it's going to be crazy match, and then it happens. I feel like Poirier's in that same category now. Am I wrong?
Poirier, I can't remember the last time he gave us even a mediocre fight. I mean, the Khabib fight wasn't terribly electrifying to watch, except in the sense of, wow, I cannot believe that Khabib is doing this to him like this.
But he still had a moment. He still had a moment in that fight, and nobody else has.
Yeah, I mean, he had Khabib in about as much danger as anybody has in his entire UFC career. I mean, even if, like, it reminds me of the Carlos Condit head kick on GSP, where, I don't think he was going to finish GSP, but like St. Pierre had been so airtight and so invulnerable, and everybody, I mean, a certain segment of fans were just so tired of seeing him defend over and over again in such a predictable fashion. It like kind of fired everybody up. That's what that reminds me of.
Sure. Yeah, like if you have any kind of offense and you made Khabib take a step back, it was earth shattering. Exactly. Yeah, like I remember and we're going down a rabbit hole like we always like to do, but the Michael Johnson punch, that if you turn the volume off, you don't even notice it. So I just want to read you this. Think about this with Dustin Poirier. His last 5 fights. I'm going to go all the way back to number 5. Justin Gaethje. Actually, I'm going to go back 6 fights, because think about the war he had. Oh, shit, I should go back 7 fights. The illegal knee to Eddie Alvarez. I mean, there all was. So the Eddie Alvarez illegal knee, which was a back and forth slugfest. Anthony Pettis was back and forth. Justin Gaethje, fight of the year candidate. Eddie Alvarez, incredible fight. Max Holloway, fight of the year candidate, obviously getting trashed by Khabib. And then this fight of the year candidate, Dan Hooker. And then if we do Dan Hooker, we're kind of in a similar boat with him. I mean, you think about, this fight, Dustin Poirier, the one before that, Felder was a war. I mean, he kind of, he smashed Iaquinta and Vic, but you think about the beating he took against Edson Barboza. When we talked last week, and shout out to my friend John Franklin, who came up with us about the club, like, can you get in the club? We have exciting fighters. I think both Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker has automatic passes to the exciting fighter club.
Absolutely. And the thing is, there are a lot of exciting fighters. There aren't a lot of exciting fighters who can stay that exciting while remaining, right there in title contention or even becoming champs. Like, there's a difference between how we looked at Robbie Lawler historically before and after he won that title. Because he'd always been, one of the ultimate blood and guts guys of all time. But what kind of moved him to the top of the list, the club, is when, he can do this while defending a title. He can do this while taking on top 5 guys every time he fights.
Sure.
And Poirier is basically there. He's had an interim title. He's very likely to get another title shot very soon. And Hooker doesn't take too much of a step back with this. So, they're 2 guys who are going to be like double secret, like next level members of the club here in a couple more fights.
Yeah, when I think of Dustin Poirier, I think about another guy who's in that club, and that's Eddie Alvarez. Like, I think we both agree Eddie Alvarez is in that club. But Dustin Poirier is a guy, like, I don't think Dustin Poirier is ever going to win the title. Like, I don't think he's going to beat Khabib. We can get into Justin Gaethje later. But that said, I feel like Dustin Poirier was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, when he got to the top of the mountain, he had to face Khabib. Now, Eddie Alvarez, who I just mentioned, he was like the opposite spectrum. He was at the right place at the right time. Now, we switched roles. Like, I would have gave Dustin Poirier a very good chance to beat Rafael Dos Anjos if the roles were reversed. If the Dustin Poirier right now faced, the champion Rafael Dos Anjos that Eddie Alvarez faced in that night. And I think it's going to be a shame that Dustin Poirier, in my opinion, probably will never hold. I know he won the interim, but I mean, actually hold the undisputed title.
Yeah, agreed. It would require someone other than Khabib to have the title. That's just a bad style matchup for Dustin. I mean, he's a bad matchup for anybody. He's especially bad for Dustin.
Yeah, that's exactly I was just going to say. All right, so let's get it. It was a very close fight. Twitter was going crazy through this. I scored it 48-47 for Poirier. I gave Hooker the first 2 rounds. I gave Poirier the last 3. How did you score it?
I scored it exactly the same. Yep. And after the first 2, not only had I given Hooker both of the first 2 rounds, I was like, I feel like he is gaining momentum and starting to roll downhill on Poirier. So this is going to get uglier. Either he's going to just like take 4 or 5 rounds, or maybe even finish him. So huge difference between the second end of the second round and the end of the third round in terms of the momentum and the whole complexion of the fight.
Yeah, totally. It's funny that you said that. I wrote down adjustment after the second round. If you remember, so Hooker had his way in the first round. He was picking him apart from range. Poirier is a little bit of a slow starter. He's like a guy who likes to read, and Hooker took advantage of this. I'm going to come out. He's an accurate striker. He uses his kicks well. He was taking out the front lead leg. Remember, we go back to the list of guys we just said, the amount of damage Dustin Poirier has taken through this run, the fact that he was off since last September, the fact that he had hip surgery, which never sounds good. It's like it's not your normal surgery for a fighter. It's not a broken hand or something like this. All these adding up, and then he comes out and Hook is putting it on him. I'm starting to say, oh man, this ain't good. And I picked Poirier, and I was confident in my pick with Poirier. Second round, Poirier, near the end of the first round, Poirier started getting a little bit into his range, started finding his time. I even tweeted out Poirier started to find his timing a little bit. And then Hooker, it's a back and forth first round. Beginning of the second round. And then at the end of the second round, this is when Hooker really turns it up. And this is when Hooker hurts Poirier. Like Poirier's wobbled. He's almost saved by the bell. And then that was really surprising. I'm like, oh man, not only is Hooker going to win, but is he going to stop Dustin Poirier? That's what's going through my mind. What's going through your mind after that second round?
Exact same thing. Like I already said, I gave Hooker the first 2 rounds. I thought he had all the momentum at that point. My next deeper thought than that was that Hooker was doing to Poirier what I thought Holloway was going to do to Poirier. I thought Poirier, as great as he is, he's always a very hittable guy, especially in the early rounds. And I figured that Holloway would do the thing he does, where he manages to throw 5 and 6 punch combinations punctuated with kicks while moving forward on a guy. They can't get away from him, and he just pelts him to death. He wasn't able to do that with Poirier. Poirier's power kind of stopped him in his tracks, and he could just never really get that uncorked the way he wanted to. And Hooker was doing the kind of things that I think Holloway does at his best, but it was working in those first 2 rounds. Poirier wasn't able to stop him in his tracks. He was just marching forward and backing Poirier all the way up to the fence with punches, and then just unloading on him.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Max Holloway, because as you're breaking this down, I'm starting to think about Dustin Poirier's fight with Max Holloway. And if you remember, Poirier came out fast. He got us to the lead, and then Holloway made an adjustment. He started coming around. He hurt Poirier to the point where it seemed like, oh, here goes. Now Max is going to get this late surge, and he's either going to steal the last couple rounds or he's going to win it. And then Poirier actually said in a post-fight interview, oh man, I'm hurt. Don't let this get away from you. He said this, don't let him steal this from you. And then he adjusted and won the 5th round, and probably, that won him the fight. I feel like he regathered himself, stayed composed, and then he changed up what he did. He knew the range. He was struggling with the range, so he just crowded the kicker. Where a lot of Hooker's kicks, which is always a strategy, you want to crowd the kicker. But the thing about Daniel Hooker is he does 2 things really well. He uses his knees so well that when you crowd him, you're actually getting into another realm of his offense, which might be even scarier than the kicks. But if you I think it was a great strategy before. He was you're going to lose the outside kickboxing. It sucks to be in here. I could get knocked out, but I know I'm going to lose this one. But the other thing is he sneaks in takedowns. He's a good wrestler. I shouldn't say good wrestler, but he's a serviceable wrestler. And I thought that when I don't think he basically forced Hooker to stop fighting off of his back foot, which I know I sound like a broken record. I say it all the time, fight off the back foot. But Hooker didn't like that. He actually forced Hooker to stop looking for takedowns. And I actually think the takedown attempts backfired on Hooker because he tired himself out, which we saw a week earlier with Curtis Blades, where I thought Curtis Blades started tiring himself out with his wrestling. I actually think the same thing happened with Hooker here. I mean, do you agree with me, or do you think something else won it for Poirier?
No, I think that's pretty much it. It's Poirier's adjustments between the second and third rounds, and it's not as if either guy really wilted here. I mean, both of them were pretty damn tired in the last round, but yeah, Poirier just was able to dig a little deeper. He had a little more left in the tank there. He had enough. I mean, it was still anybody's fight going into the 5th round. It was still anybody's fight halfway through the 5th round. So, I mean, we're talking about just seconds and small numbers of minutes here that he was able to reach into the bag and have a little more left than Hooker did.
Yeah. Now, both guys are very experienced, but Dustin Poirier has higher level experience. Like he's good.
And he has more experience in 5-round fights. And even though he doesn't actually go past the 3rd round very often, there's a whole difference when you're training for a 5-round fight, when you go into a fight pacing yourself the first 2-3 rounds as if you're going to need to fight 5 rounds, even if you don't actually go to that 5th round. It's been a different experience. You have that, you have that in your mind. You have that in your muscle memory.
Yeah, and I also think about, we know that fighting is such a psychological game. Dustin Poirier has taken out some really tough guys, but there's like a level that he hasn't reached yet. And beating Dustin Poirier, that would have been his best win. But you can't say the same. Like this win for Dustin Poirier is not his best win. He has beaten Max Holloway. He has beaten, current interim champion Justin Gaethje. He's beaten former champion Eddie Alvarez. Like he's got these wins on his resume. So the confidence going in the 5th round, like I think that made a lot more difference than Hooker when he might not have been in the situation where he had to dig deep. We've seen Poirier have to do that, and I think that made a big difference. I want to say this, and I think you're going to agree with me. Whoever showed Dustin Poirier the guillotine, I actually think they're making him a worse fighter. Because I think there was moments in this fight where he was starting to take over and Hooker went for a takedown. And Poirier, which he did in the 5th round, he didn't look for his guillotine. He was sprawling and it made a big difference. He needs to just abandon that guillotine. Just forget it. He's not hitting it.
And there's an interesting difference there because there are guys that will grab a front headlock when somebody shoots on them, but they're doing it as a defensive thing. It's almost it's a counter. It's asking the fighter who's shooting, which way do you want to go with this? And it's stopping that takedown. It's making him think on future ones. But there's a difference between that and then grabbing a guillotine, sinking it, immediately jumping to guard and just cranking it and trying to go for the finish right there. Which is what Poirier did, especially the first 2 times that he used that guillotine. It made me worry he was going to burn himself out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we know the guillotine is a move that definitely does burn people out, burns your wrist out. If you're a boxer, the last thing you want is your arms. You get the extra lactic acid in your arms. He has 2 submission wins by guillotine. I just think it's not making it. I think he'd be much better to look for a sprawl and brawl game instead of looking for this sub. Next thing I want to talk about, Twitter was absolutely blowing up. I'm going to pick a fight with Twitter. A lot of people, Michael Bisping was calling this one of the greatest fights of all time. I agree with that. I think this is one of the greatest fights of all time. What I don't agree with is how many people were saying this is the fight of the year. I think the fight of the year is already wrapped up. I think Weili Zhang, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, not only is the fight of the year, but is by far the fight of the year, that they are way ahead of the pack. Tell me why I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. I watched that fight. In fact, I watched that fight. People on out in Radio Land can't see me, but I'm repping my Alex Morano shirt today. Watched it with him and his family and some of his team. And so I'm in a room with, it's all people who train. It's half at least amateur fighters, several professional fighters, including, a UFC contender. They were all just losing their shit, saying this is one of the best fights I've seen in years. I think people who are calling this the fight of the year or even a candidate for fight of the year must have forgot or didn't watch it.
Like I was having this, debate. I didn't really debate because it's a fantastic fight. So like sometimes when you say like, oh, that's not the fight of the year, people are like, you're talking crap. Sorry, I don't know if you guys. Sorry, I was pulling up stats. I don't know if you heard. Hopefully that didn't come through. No. They started slowing down in this fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang did not slow down. Joanna Jędrzejczyk landed more strikes in a loss than Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald did. Robbie Lawler, Rory McDonald 2, which is a lot of people consider the greatest fight of all time. I don't, but Joanna Jędrzejczyk landed more strikes in a loss than those two fighters combined in a fight. Like the fifth round was just as high paced as the first. I say this. Second round could be round of the year. It was a pretty good round.
Yep.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Weili Zhang, all 5 rounds could be fight of the year. The technique they had, the output they had, the damage they had, to me, I think it could be the greatest fight ever. I know I might be when I said it back then, I might have been living in the moment, but I think if I could watch one fight again for the rest of my life, it might be Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
I'm gonna watch it again as soon as we finish recording tonight. It's so good. It had everything you want, like obviously constant action, no let up, but it had the swings and momentum. You had moments where you thought, okay, fighter A has got this, or fighter B is turning it around. It wasn't just a competitive one-sided thing the whole time. The real question is, would you call this the number 2 fight of the year, or would you still make it Gaethje versus Ferguson?
Well, I like this fight better because Gaethje and Ferguson wasn't competitive. This fight was competitive.
Yeah,
heading into the 5th round, I don't know who's going to win. Heading into the 5th round, we were talking about is Ferguson going to hold on? Like that fight was that fight was already done heading into the 5th round. This one wasn't. I need some competitive. I need some back and forth. I see some people tweeting out a fight in Cage Warriors and Cage Titans. Listen, I can speak for both of us, but I'll speak for me. Listen, I'll speak for sure, dog, okay? A regional fight is never going to win fight of the year. It's not going to happen. You need some stakes to it. Chances are a lower prelim fight in the UFC is not going to, it's always going to be a higher up, more profile. That's just how it is. Am I wrong?
No, stakes are a big part of it. I mean, otherwise, I can see a knockout every weekend here on the local level that's as brutal as anything you'll see in the UFC this year. Nobody cares except for the 500 people in the room.
Yeah. When Francis Ngannou destroyed Alistair Overeem's neck, that happens in the regional scene. Same exact situation. It's not going to win knockout of the year. I mean, how many 5-second flying knee knockouts have we seen in MMA history? A whole bunch of them.
Yep.
But there's a reason why Jorge Masvidal stands above all, because not only was he in the UFC, but there was a lot of stakes. It was a high profile fight. It was a lot of bad blood. There's a lot to it. The personalities, so that matters. So at least I'm glad that we're on the same page when it comes to fight of the year. I think that one's. I would be shocked if anything passes Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Is this the best fight of either one of theirs career? Now that's the debate.
That is a great question.
I'm going to say yes for Hooker. I think this was better than the Felder fight.
I would agree, and it has less of a bitter taste because I didn't love the decision in the Felder fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people felt that way. Poirier, I wasn't planning on asking this question. I would have rewatched the Gaethje fight. I would have rewatched the Holloway fight. I'm going to put a pin on that. But it might be. I think it's the best one of Hooker's career. It might be the best one of Poirier's career.
It might be the best one of Poirier's career, but that's a bit more of a crowded field.
Yeah, I know. Which is it's crazy to think what happened last night is not even the best fight in his career. Or could not be the best fight. So let's do this before we move on from the main event. Let's do some matchmaking. I think we're going to spend a lot more time on Dustin Poirier. So because of that, let's do Dan Hooker. He called for this fight against Dustin Poirier. When you take a chance like that, it works out. You win. He wins. He's probably getting a title shot. You lose at 155. You fall way back. So you're the matchmaker. Who would you like to see Dan Hooker be put with next?
Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing him. I mean, who? I'm trying to think of who else in the top 10 is coming off a loss, but I guess I shouldn't be stuck on that coming off a loss thing.
Yeah.
But I would love to see him take on Kevin Lee.
Okay.
I would love, or if that's not feasible, the other half of that fight, Charles DeBronx just won that fight.
Yeah.
I would love to see him fight DeBronx.
Yeah, that's
either of those work for me.
That's who I had. So Dan Hooker said in his pre-fight, like if he was playing matchmaker, said if I lose, I can go against Charles Oliveira. To me, it makes a lot of sense. Charles Oliveira's striking has really improved. He deserves a high-ranked fighter. That's who I would do. This
has been happening a lot kind of during the COVID era when training is a little bit compromised. If Edson Barboza wants to take a fight at lightweight, if he's just going to flush the handle on the whole featherweight experiment, I would love to see them run it back. I'm sure Hooker wants that one back.
Yeah.
I imagine Barboza thinks he can win again. So that'd be a little outside the box, but that would be more of a step back than I think Hooker needs to take, even if he did lose their first meeting pretty badly.
Yeah, I don't know if Daniel Hooker's liver wants that fight back. Dustin Poirier. I'm going to let you go first on this. If Dustin Poirier says he wants to take some time off. He says he needs to fall in love with MMA, and it's hard to ask a guy, who do you want to fight next when you just had, get hit in the face as many times as he did in that situation. He's also in a very tough situation, being that he's just recently fought for the title, lost. But if you're Dustin Poirier, your matchmaker, who would you put him against?
The Bronx, or just sit and wait. And it may be the situation where, he already fought Khabib, but he's the next guy in line and he deserves it. And he's earned his way back to another shot. And it's on him to make adjustments to make the next time turn out differently.
So Brian Knapp does the, matchmaker article on our site. He put him against Tony Ferguson. That was a popular name that's thrown out there. I think Ariel Helwani said that fight. I think I saw Aaron Bronstetter put that fight out there. This is what I would do. Dustin Poirier says he wants to sit out. He says he might even wait till next year. To me, that's perfect. So if I'm the matchmaker, I'm having him sit out. I'm also having Tony Ferguson sit out, just because he should recover. And this is basically what happens. If Khabib Nurmagomedov wins, beats Tony Ferguson, beats Justin Gaethje, I throw Tony Ferguson in. And we'd finally try it again. Try to do Khabib Tony again. If Justin Gaethje wins, well, Dustin Poirier beat him. Now Dustin Poirier gets a title shot. So I kind of just sit them all out, and see what happens. That's what I would. I know that's not the popular choice. It wouldn't look good in an article to write this or that, but that's what I would do.
I like your idea better than mine.
Well, I definitely went with the sexier pick than Charles Owen. I want speaking of sexy, we got to bring up Mike Perry and Mickey. I thought I was gonna go with an insane, like that fight was insane, and that's how I'd go. Mike Perry and Mickey Gall was somehow not even the strangest thing that happened this evening. They were in the match in the co-main event. I was very confident in Mike Perry. I said if Mike Perry can't beat Mickey Gall, then he should just be cuffed in the UFC. Like I thought it was a perfect matchup. This is the guy that Mike Perry. I'm not a big fan of Mike Perry, but say what you want about it. He has fought a who's who. He's fought he's had a tough road in the UFC with the guys he's gone against. Donald Cerrone, Jeff Neal, Alan Jobe. He's faced some tough. Vicente Lique, Paul Felder. Mickey Gall does not fit in the same category as all those guys. Mike Perry won. He won decisively. I think he clearly won the second and third round. Could possibly have won all 3 rounds. I actually gave him all 3 rounds. But he did not look good in my opinion. Even though he got a win, I don't feel better about him. I actually feel worse about him. I actually feel better about Mickey Gall. I was not high in Mickey Gall. I don't see him ever being a top 15, but he showed some improvements. He was picking apart Mike Perry in the beginning. And then Mike Perry realized, I'm so much stronger and better athlete than Mickey Gall. Maybe I should just throw hard and I'll win. And that's basically what happened. And he just had big brother in him, throwing him around. But yeah, to me, Mike Perry looked really bad. He holding his hands low. He looked slower than usual. He was walking right into punches. If that was a harder hitter than Mickey Gall, he might have got knocked out. Am I being too hard on Mike Perry?
I don't think so. And the funny thing is, on my own show, I kind of made jokes coming into this card that wouldn't it be funny if after all the controversy and all the to-do about him having nothing but his girlfriend in his corner and talking about not really having a traditional training camp for this, wouldn't it be funny if he just showed up and showed a more diverse and developed game than he'd ever shown in any of his other fights? And then he came out and basically did exactly that. I mean, he used more offensive and positional grappling more effectively than he really had in any of his other fights. But no, it's hard for me to be too high on this. And I feel bad. I don't want to just devalue a probably UFC career-saving win too hard. But Gall just isn't it. Like, if he's the kind of UFC material he wants to be, if he is a reliable action fighter who hovers around kind of the bottom of the top 15, he punches a hole through Mickey Gall's head in 2 minutes. He doesn't get pieced up by him for the entire first round. So I'm happy for him. I'm relieved that whatever he's doing, I guess, worked for the moment. But yeah, I don't put too much stock in this.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Mike Perry a little bit longer, but I want to jump over to Mickey Gall. Two things that stand out to me. Mickey Gall's cardio is not good. We talked about that in the past. In the Randy Brown fight, he gassed out hard. This fight, he gassed out hard. And the other thing is, we have to stop making him sound like he's some absolute wizard in jiu-jitsu. He's a good grappler, but if Travis Lutter is the Michael Jordan of grappling, as Mike Goldberg once said, Mickey Gall's like Ron Harper. Like, he's like okay. Like, he's an okay grappler. He's not Damian Maia. He's not Charles Oliveira. He's not Ryan Hall. Like he's not if the fight hits the mat, the fight's over. That's not him.
Nope.
Like, Brandon Allen is like, I'd be more scared having Brandon Allen on top of me than Mickey Gall. Like, I don't know. He's just average grappler.
That sounds about right to me.
Yeah. I mean, is it that the rest of his game was so bad that we had to pretend we had to find it?
He was a 1-0 fighter. The UFC had to call him good at something to justify him being there. And so they went with the thing that he was slightly less bad at the time, and that somehow got conflated into he's a grappling wizard.
Yeah. I don't know. Speaking of 1-0, let's talk about 1-0 corner woman. I wrote down her name. I don't know where I put it. Mike Perry's girlfriend. I forgot her name. I apologize. He was the only this like 4'11" girl who was holding her pads over her head, cornered Mike Perry, and her advice. I caught all her advice through the 3 rounds. After the first round, she said, "You're doing good." That was between the first and second round. In the second to the third round, she grabbed some ice and said, "Where do you want the ice?" And then she yelled out in the third round, "Punch him in the face." And
yes, that was. Go ahead.
I think that was all good advice.
All very solid advice, and honestly more than I expected out of her, considering that during his media day interview, he flat out said he told her not to say anything.
Yeah. He said water, and she said water. Like, she questioned, like, that what you wanted, water? And so I forgot that he did that, and then he asked him, "Where do you want the ice?" And he said, "The back of my neck." So Mike Perry's post-fight interview was extremely entertaining. This guy has some mental illness. There's no way around it. He went on a rant on why she was cornering him, that he's looking for friendship in a corner, not a coach. But then he said that he needs a team. I'm sure the vast amount of coaches in MMA are knocking on the door to get a chance to coach Mike Perry.
Or to not coach him, apparently.
Yeah, he was ranting about taxes. He didn't understand how taxes work, that he has to pay taxes. He's very upset about taxes.
Don't give me money if you don't want me to spend it.
So I don't want to make this political, but I am a police officer besides doing this, and people often ask me, what is it like to be a police officer? Watch Mike Perry's interview. Like, that's pretty much my everyday job. This is what I do every day. Their teeth is usually more rotten out than that, but yeah, try to get a story out of, hey, what happened? Why are you bleeding? And then have them go in and Mike Perry rant. Yeah, that's my job.
Wow.
Speaking of wow, Mike Perry wasn't singing in between rounds and afterwards, like Maurice Green was doing in his fight against John Vellante, who weighed in at a whopping. This guy moved up from heavyweight, from 205 to heavyweight. Usually, you come up from, everyone made a big deal when I think DC weighed 240 or something. John Vellante weighed 255. He gained 50 pounds. All 50 pounds went right to his stomach. The broadcast team was talking about Maurice Green drinking by the pool. It looked like John Vellante drank that pool. I tweeted out, he looked like Kevin James' character in Here Comes the Boom if he reached the UFC. Like, that was John Vellante. Yeah, John Vellante was so fat. He made Daniel Cormier look like Sage Northcutt. I got nothing else. I would just say that we weren't going to talk about the fight. I was just going to make fun of John Vellante. You got any John Vellante being fat jokes?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't even know if they're jokes, but just observations. But looking at him and Maurice Green facing off at the weigh-ins and realizing that they had weighed in at exactly the same was bananas. It was crazy also how the UFC booth was kind of going to lengths to explain away like how he looked and how much he weighed. Like, they were like, he was an All-American linebacker at Hofstra and he weighed blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he may have weighed blah, 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 but he did not look like that when he was a linebacker in college. Like, he just looked big and out of shape. He honestly, he looked to me like you like had alternate Travis Fulton in New York.
Yeah.
But the thing is, one, Travis Fulton, was fighting 32 times a year, and two, Travis Fulton hadn't been a light heavyweight 6 months or a year before. It would all have been no big deal if he'd walked out and won.
Yeah.
Or even if he'd walked out and lost in another way than just being completely fucking exhausted. But when those things happen, then people look at the gut and they're like, oh, well, he wasn't taking this very seriously.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the face-off. If you have to see the face-off between Maurice Green and John Vellante. Maurice Green has about a foot on John Vellante vertically, and John Vellante has a foot on Maurice Green horizontally. Like, it's pretty bad. John Vellante looked like a shaved Tank Abbott. I think I tweeted to you. The Rock is going to play Mark Kerr in the new Smashing Machine movie. That's going to be young Mark Kerr. If they get to the later stages of Mark Kerr, just throw in John Vellante. Like, he would fit perfectly. All that said about John Vellante, there was 1:16 left in this fight. Maurice Green won by submission from a submission off his back. I think there was a arm triangle off his back. John Vellante was going to win, in my opinion, if he could hang on for another 14. But despite being that fat, he was going to win. Maurice Green looked terrible. He came out first round, was throwing some kicks, and then John Vellante was like, maybe I should hit him back. And when John Vellante started hitting him back, he won the second round. He hurt him to the body in the third round, then eventually dropped him. Got on top, was like hammer fisting him, and to me, it looked like Maurice Green was just holding on. And was like, all right, I lost this round. Let me hold on so it's not 10-8. Maybe I won the first two rounds and maybe I'll win. And while he's holding on, hoping the referee to stand him up, suddenly John Vellante just tapped out. Am I wrong?
No, you absolutely are correct. And it took several replays for me to figure out what the hell was happening there. Because from the first angle I saw it, I didn't even see that Vellante's arm was trapped in there. I was like, did he just basically like squeeze his neck from underneath like an Ezekiel choke with nothing against the throat? Like, did you just hug this man to death? And then once I realized, okay, his arm was in there, it is sort of a arm triangle choke from the bottom. But the funny thing is, I don't think it would have worked if it had just been his arm over his head like it usually is, but his arm was kind of in front of his own face, kind of like it was more like an inverted scarf hold almost, where like the pressure's coming from like your own arm being pulled across your neck. It was the most terrible submission I have seen in the UFC in probably 10 years.
Yeah.
It was amazingly like just what a shit show.
I feel like the easiest way for John Vellante to not get submitted by this was to not tap on Maurice Green. Like any other way, he doesn't get submitted. Like he wasn't getting submitted. It wasn't a submission. Nope. John Vellante, when I used to coach wrestling, there was a kid, I don't remember his name. I used to call him Nickelback because when he was a freshman, his first practice, he wore a Nickelback shirt to wrestling. So of course I had to call him Nickelback. We had this joke about Nickelback. No matter what he did, no matter how much he's winning by, he was going to find a way to roll to his back and get pinned. Like, no matter like how much he was winning by, he'd find a way to get himself pinned. So John Nickelback Vellante. So the most entertaining part was Maurice Green was very emotional. He was crying.
Oh my goodness.
When you beat John Vellante, that does bring tears to your eyes. I know. I'm sorry. You guys, listen. John Vellante would absolutely destroy me. Like I know that. John Vallante's still in better shape than I am. Like I know. I'm being rough on him. All right, we're having a little fun. Give me a break. But Tanner Bozier and Maurice Green had a little spat by the pool where they shared words. Tanner Bozier called out Maurice Green. Maurice Green accepted. They said they'll do it at Fight Island. I'm cool with that.
I like that as well. Green seemed to more or less verbally agree to it there. Make that fight. The thing is, like, Green kind of laid an egg on Saturday, but I generally think of him as a dude with some potential. He's got some tools. He's got some weapons. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 10 like title contender, even at heavyweight. But it's even just rare enough to see a guy that tall who actually kind of like uses his reach and his length to do things. Like a heavyweight, hey, who will throw up a triangle when he's on the ground. A heavyweight who will use jabs and push kicks to kind of keep shorter dudes off him. Almost to a fault in this past fight, but that's a conversation for another time. I want to see him stick around. I want to see him. Yeah, let's have him fight Tanner Bozier. I think Bozier beats him, but now Green's not in the position where one loss is probably going to get him dropped. So yeah, make it happen.
Speaking of getting dropped from the UFC, we need to drop the judge who scored the Brendan Allen Kyle Dawkins fight 30-27 Allen in a round that some people were questioning if it should have been a 10-8 round for Dawkins. I don't. I scored at 29-28 for Brendan Allen. Before this fight happened, I tweeted out the lines. Brendan Allen was this huge, massive favorite. I almost picked Dawkins. I tweeted out, I said, this fight should be a pick'em. It was really fun, bloody war, back and forth. These guys were probably studying, like searching Amazon for what they were going to buy with their $50,000. And then Daniel Hook and Dustin Poirier just stole that from him because these guys were going to get $50. It was a fantastic fight. Some things that stood out to me. I don't think Brendan Allen's that good. I've picked against him his last two fights. He has a lot of holes in his striking. He is just a bull. Like he's just good. He kind of reminds me a lot of Evan Tanner, where Evan Tanner was not that good technically, but he was like tough as nails, and he would always get in these scrappy, weird, scrambling brawls, and he usually would win them. But I don't think that is a good, like, perfect. Evan Tanner was a middleweight champion. Brendan Allen's middleweight. So, but I'm not saying like compare him to middleweight champion. I'm saying I don't think I didn't mean that as a compliment. I don't think that'll work in this UFC. I seen some people thinking this guy, based on his age, that this guy could be a future title contender. I don't see it. I think the small cage hurt Kyle Dawkins. If they had the bigger cage, he might win. He'd give him a little more space. And then Kyle Dawkins had a terrible fight IQ, in my opinion. I tweeted this out like 10 times during that fight. Kyle Dawkins, in my opinion, was piecing him up in the striking, but for some reason he kept wanting to grapple where Allen would reverse him or cause a scramble and win the scrambles. Like, I feel like if they rematch 3 months from now and Kyle Dax rewatched the film, he wins.
Rewatched the film, had a full camp, no more jitters. I agree. No, I was feeling the same thing you were, where he would get in this thing where he'd hit him with like a clean 1-2 or a clean 3-piece, and then just immediately just kind of drop and change levels and go for like a double. It almost like without even waiting to see,
and then get swept.
Yeah, exactly. Like, dude, you just hit him clean 3 times. Keep hitting him until he makes you stop.
Yeah, especially the one that in the second round. Okay, and I get some of the reason why he grabbed. I mean, he got hit with a knee early, like 30 seconds of the fight, almost got knocked out. So I get maybe he was a little not that confident striking. But in the third round, when you're down 2-0 and you're coming up and you're hitting a 5-punch combination, and Allen looks tired, his hands down by his waist, and you're teeing off him, you need a stoppage. Like he landed like a 7-punch combination and shoot. It was driving me crazy. I read that. He pieced up Brendan Allen, gave him some really bad damage thrown. That Brendan Allen has 3 different facial fractures.
Yeah, he's going to be out for a while, it looks like.
Which means that the fight that he was supposed to fight this night, Ian Heinisch, that's who he called out during the post-fight, said he can't keep running from him. It looks like that's not going to happen. That said, I will take Ian Heinisch over Brendan Allen right now.
I think I would too.
No, I think Ian Heinisch is a more well-rounded fighter. I think he has more power. I think he's a better wrestler. I don't know if he has the dog in him that Brendan Allen has. Like, Brendan Allen has a dog in him, so I don't want to seem like I'm talking so much shit about Brendan Allen, because you can develop that other stuff. You have to have that dog in you. So I mean that as a compliment. Like, there is a lot of potential, but he's got a lot of holes that he's got to shore up. But he has the key thing. He does have the key thing, which is just mental toughness. I mean, he could have quit. He made 3 facial fractures. He could have quit in this fight, and he didn't. So I'll give him credit for that.
Oh, man, we just got done singing the praises of Dustin Poirier. He's always been a talented guy, always been an athletic guy. He's had some holes in his game before. He's had some IQ lapses, but nobody's ever been able to question that dude is a dog.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, not since he was like 17 years old fighting 200-pound men out in the swamp in Louisiana. Like, so yeah, like if you've got that and you're willing to work, the rest of the stuff can fall into place. I agree there.
Speaking of fighting people in the swamps of Louisiana, I have no idea where this guy is from. But Jason Witt, he is from Missouri, close enough. He filled in on less than 48 hours notice to take on Takashi Sato. The notice was so short that when the broadcast started, he didn't even have his medicals cleared, that they had to rearrange the bout order just to make sure it happened, and that's why he got thrown in the main event. The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about these guys taking these short notice fights of crazy notice. Last week, it was Justin James getting the quick knockout of Frank Camacho. Unfortunately, that run has ran out as Jason Witt was dispatched quick. Witt he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for this fight. Sato landed him a 1-2. Nice win for Sato. I think to me, there's nothing else. One guy is UFC caliber, the other guy isn't.
One guy certainly has yet to prove he is. You know, he performed under about the worst conditions you could possibly imagine. You know, just basically sitting back there in the locker rooms, waiting and hoping that your medicals come through. But good for Sato. I mean, I'm always down for a guy that fights like he does. You know, he never has a bad fight. His wins are nasty knockouts. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of guys that I was going to say is not UFC caliber, Julian Erosa proved me wrong. To me, I thought this was the easiest fight on the card to pick. I had Sean Woodson. Going back to Sean Woodson, when he was fighting on the Contender Series, he took a short notice fight against McKinney. I can't remember the guy's first name. But McKinney I was high on. I was like, man, this guy's really good. And Sean Woodson was this last-minute replacement, so I had to redo tape study. And I was like, let me just get some information on this guy before I pick. Oh, Terrence McKinney was his name. Before I picked McKinney to beat him. And then I started watching film on Woodson. And suddenly I was like, wow, this guy's pretty good. This ain't an easy fight for McKinney. And I watched another one. I'm like, yo, he's real good. Then I watched like the third one. I'm like, dude, this guy's gonna win. And I picked him to win, and he was like this. It was probably my best call in contender series, like Woodson, that no one thought was gonna win. Then I said I was all over him. Kyle Bochniak, I was there in Boston covering for Sherdog. I was all over him. He looked fantastic. Then they brought Julian Rosa. I'm like, oh my god, could there be a better stylistic matchup? He's gonna like this is gonna be a brutal knockout. Like, you know, he played it kind of safe against Bochniak. Bochniak is a dog. You know, but Julian Rosa, terrible stylistic matchup. Like, hands low. He's just going to walk into a punch. First round looked like that. And then it didn't. I felt like we had the best of, so basically what I was saying is I was driving the hype train of Sean Woodson. I wasn't even slowing down for anybody to get on. I was like, too late, suckers. You should have listened. You should have read my contender series. And now I look like an idiot because he just lost to 1-5 Julian, 1-5 in the UFC. Before 1-4 in the UFC, Julian Rosa. Man, I feel like we had the good and the best and the worst of Sean Woodson in the same fight. His accuracy, fantastic. His vision, fantastic. But three things that really stood out to me. He doesn't like to be pressured. He has, you seem like he's very comfortable against the cage. A lot of boxers like to do that rope and dope style. I don't think that works good in MMA. And he wants nothing to do around. When the fight hit the ground, a couple moments where Arosa was underneath him, he'd pop right back up. When Arosa, even one scramble pursued, Arosa locked in that Kimura. Yeah. And man, was my pick of Sean Woodson, like, being a future title contender. Like, how bad does it look right now?
It definitely hit a speed bump. It will when an undefeated prospect loses and loses badly, the real proof is in how they bounce back. What do they look like in their next fight?
Yeah.
My thought,
I don't know if it was a speed bump. I don't know if it's a speed bump or his engine fell out on the middle of 95. Like, his engine fell out and like all the other cars are crashing into it.
You have a lot better eye for striking than I do. So tell me if I'm just, crazy here, but I was really impressed in the first round. It's always interesting to see a guy from an actual boxing background, like just how superior their footwork can be to somebody who's kind of trained in MMA style kickboxing. The way he was, using lateral movement, circling out, kind of sliding out of the pocket when he wanted to. He had Arosa looking clumsy for the first round, and he was hitting him back with just occasional, jabs and stuff. But I just felt like, okay, any minute now, Woodson is going to stop playing around and start sitting down on some punches and really cutting Arosa up, and never really did. And then between the first and second round, I don't know if his coaches talked to him or he just buckled down, but Arosa got better at cutting off the cage in the second round as well. Kept kicking him, kicking a boxer low in MMA is, always a tried and true strategy as well. But yeah, he never really uncorked what it looked like he was going to. And then once I got on the ground, Arosa brand game on him.
Yeah, so there's some things. Yeah, I totally agree with the footwork, but I think one thing that happened was the pressure from Arosa really just slowed down Woodson, and that was why he stopped moving so much, and he started like doing the shell game where he was shelling up, and then he was like trying to shell. He was trying to take the shots from Arosa to respond with his own, and he was actually still having a lot of success with that. Some things I didn't like was and I'm going to say a very blanket statement about boxing, and obviously I'm not talking about all boxers, but a lot of times, especially in the amateur, which he had a long amateur career, is you almost take turns in striking because the defense is so different that you throw your combination, okay, now it's my turn. And I think Woodson has fallen into that a little bit. And he wasn't expecting, like, okay, Arosa throws his, now I throw mine, and like, no, Arosa's still throwing. And I think that was an issue. And I think he got really frustrated that when he hit Arosa didn't step back, didn't go down. He did go down one time in the third round, then he got submitted like a minute later. But basically Arosa was just going to turn it into a brawl, and he didn't want a brawl. He wanted an outside kickboxing game. And I feel like he was kind of falling. He lacks power. He lacks true one-punch knockout power because he lands clean, and that's an issue. Makes me wonder, like, he's got such a long reach. He still would have that reach at 155. Would the power go with him if he went up to 155? Maybe. But I also feel like he he has a little sparring in him where he doesn't look to put you out. He looks to kind of play with you, like he was playing with his food a little bit, and then he choked on his food. I still am gonna be leading the train. This is only his second fight with James Krause with a good team. He was always in like a small team. There was definitely huge moments, and he has the vision, and that's what I always talk. When I see a guy, when he sees his shots, he aims his shots. It's something that Adesanya does, something Anderson Silva did. All the best strikers, they see the shots, and Woodson does that, and I like that. So I'm still huge on Sean Woodson. I'm hoping this is one of those terrible losses we look back years later, like, wow, how did he lose to that guy?
Yep.
Speaking of a surprising win, and I don't know if this was a surprising win, but I mean a surprising run in the UFC. Kama Worthy is now 2-0, twice as an underdog. Really fun scrap. To me, Kama Worthy just dug deeper. What do you have to say about this fight?
That's pretty much it. I gave Worthy the first round. I gave Pena the second round. I'm one of the few people that gave Pena a 10-8. I don't know if I would still think that if I rewatched it, but in the moment it felt right. But either way, it was anybody's fight, at least not to lose going into the third. But Worthy just had more. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, Worthy, he's now 2-0. He got a deep guillotine. As soon as when he jumped on this thing, he adjusted his hands. It was super, super deep. Luis Pena tapped out. I love Kama Worthy's post-fight interview. He knows who he is, and I love that. He's like 33 or 34 years old. He's like, I'm not top 15. I ain't fighting anyone in top 15 unless I'm getting paid top 15. I just want... He was like, he called out like the whole roster. He just started naming names. Like I heard Yancy Medeiros. I don't remember who else. He just was naming guys. Like, I'll fight that guy. I'll fight this guy. I'll fight that guy. Yeah, man. That's like, I like that. I like when a guy has someone in mind. I don't know if he had someone in mind or if he just like pulled up the UFC's website and just started naming people. But, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I'm a fan of Kama Worthy. He's fun.
Completely agreed. If he knows that he's probably just, kind of another roster guy picking up some checks, I am happy to accept him as that. Beautiful. Much better than hearing someone coming off kind of that quality of win call out a top 10 fighter. I like the self-awareness. And he tried to help his city by naming fighters from Pittsburgh that should be in the UFC as well. So that's great.
He gives back. So Luis Pena falls to 4-3 in the UFC. To me, a guy that has all the potential in the world with his length, with his wrestling, he's missing something. I don't know what it is, but he's missing something. Maybe he needs a camp change. I know he's jumped back and forth. I mean, I know he changed camps again from AKA to ATT. I know he's bounced back and forth between weight divisions. I know he's still only 26, so he's not young, but something needs to change because I feel like we're losing on good potential in Luis Pena.
Agreed. He's got some tools, some individual high level tools, but seems not to make him connect, which leads to him losing in weird ways or just losing really flat performances against guys who are not as talented as him, like the Matt Frevola fight. Like I don't think there's any individual thing that Matt Frevola does better than Luis Pena, yet he beat him pretty handily. Yeah.
Speaking of beating someone pretty handily, how about Tanner Boser? First round knockout of PFL Season 1 champion Felipe Lins. Boser looked fantastic. Like he came out, you seen like his physique looked different. He said, I know he lost some fat, he gained some muscle. He looked thinner but more muscular. He was faster. He was landing in his shots, mixing it up, and then perfectly knockout. On the flip side, Lins looked terrible. He looked slow, flat-footed, had no answer for the leg kicks. Yeah, Tanner Boser, like, I don't know if I'm living in the moment, but like, I could see him like cracking the bottom top 15. Like, maybe I'm overreacting to this, but he looked good. He called out Maurice Green. We already talked about that. I think you said you take Tanner Boser. I take Tanner Boser too.
And if Tanner Boser wins that, he is done fighting just another guy type fighters in the UFC heavyweight division. The division is so thin, so old, and so many guys in the top 15 have already fought each other at least once. I mean, Tanner Boser is fighting a top 15 type guy, probably someone who's much older and on the downside of his career that he might be able to step up and beat. It's kind of interesting to see. I was as pleasantly surprised at his physical transformation since his last fight as I was kind of stunned and disappointed at John Volante's.
Yeah, like they went the opposite ways.
Yeah.
Speaking of physical changes, when you're 20 years old, that happens quick, and Kay Hansen is turning into a much different fighter, much better fighter. She picked up a huge victory over Jinh Frey. Obviously, if this is a fight that if they fought Invicta would headline a Victor card, Jinh Frey is the current atomweight champion. She obviously moved up to strawweight. Fun fight. I gave Jinh Frey the first round. She stuffed a couple takedowns, was landing the counter strikes, being a classic Frey, close, kind of low output, boring fight. And then Kay Hansen realized, I need to really wrestle. I got to close this no matter what. She was closing distance, not really getting the position wrong, but she was using this. She would get in on the hips and then whiz. She'd do like a whizzer throw, and she got a takedown, smothered in the second round. Third round was kind of, early in the third round, Frey was kind of really focusing on the takedown defense, and Hansen did it again. She hit that whizzer, jumped right over when they both went. They went to the 50-50 position, they call it in wrestling. She jumped right over to an armbar. Remind me of Dustin Hazlett's submission of Josh Berkman, one of my all-time favorites. A fantastic submission. So basically, I don't know if I explained it right. Whizzer, she jumped over to an armbar, finished her off. This girl is 20 years old. Huge win. I don't think people are making enough out of the submission. I think this is a submission of the year candidate. I was that impressed. Am I overreacting?
No, it was a sensational submission. It was basically the same in broad strokes as the Hazlett versus Berkman submission. Hazlett there was a little more visual sass on it. One, because he took more of kind of an exaggerated angle of kind of twirling around his body, and he's a long, lanky dude, so there was more amplitude to it. It wasn't like this little stocky 5'3" ball of girl muscle doing it. But yeah, it was a sensational submission. Offhand, it's certainly in my top 5 submissions of the year so far, and couldn't have come at a better time.
Yeah, so Jinh Frey, she seems like someone who'd better off in Invicta, be the atomweight champion. I feel like that's a sailing in Jinh Frey, but I'm glad that she got a fight in the UFC, so forever should be get to call UFC veteran. I mean, she'll have all the fights in UFC, but it's nice to see nearing the end of her career that she gets that at least that title for the rest of her life. Back to Kay Hansen. She's only 20 years old. They were doing a lot of Ronda Rousey comparisons because she said she got into MMA because of Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey tweeted at her after the fight. I really hope the UFC doesn't rush her because they don't have a lot of wrestlers. She's a good wrestler, especially at 125. She's so young in a division that there's a lot of older women, girls like Collar Esparza, Tisha Torres, girls kind of on their way out. I really hope they don't ruin her by rushing her.
Completely agreed. And there's already been just a little bit of a hint of that already. I picked Jinh Frey to win this fight. I thought this was going to be a little too much for Hansen. And I kind of pointed out that Hansen was one Hail Mary armbar away from losing 3 straight fights in Invicta. She the comparisons to Rousey or to someone, like Aspen Ladd a couple years ago, I thought were unwarranted because those two had this sort of unbeatable, bulletproof aura to them by the time, they hit the UFC. Hansen doesn't have that. Hansen, I think she was 6-3 coming into this fight, but she has all the potential in the world. She is physically a brute in a way that we don't see very often in the women's divisions, strawweight or otherwise. And yes, I hope she gets more appropriate fights and gets some good kind of seasoning before they throw her at the top 10 fighters.
Yeah, yes. I said I want them to rush her. Jinh Frey in your UFC debut is a tough fight as in itself. If they were adding young flyweights, young strawweights they want to add to this division. Then they need to bring Aaron Blanchfield, who actually has a win over Kay Hansen, who is 5-1, should be 6-1. I mean, she's 21 years old. She beat Tracy Cortez, who's already in the UFC. But yeah, that's a girl. If you like prospects, check out Aaron Blanchfield. I'm really high on that girl. In the opening fight, the curtain jerker, we had Jordan Griffin versus Yusuf Salal. Very close fight. Came down to striking versus grappling. Came down to the second round to me. I thought Jordan Griffin's wrestling won in the first round. Zalil's striking won the third round. Really close second round. Zalal gets the win. He mentioned many times he's only 23 years old. Good movement, good striking. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of people are higher on him than I am.
When I see a sassy, motion heavy striker like that in these weight divisions, I always kind of wonder when they'll hit the wall in the form of, a better Jordan Griffin. Somebody who is bigger, stronger, wants to wrestle, wants to clinch, wants to kind of just, throw the fight into the mud and grind it out, and how they'll react. Because if you can't deal with that, you're not breaking into the top 10 at 145 very easily, even if you're a guy who wants to strike. So I have no idea what his ceiling is at this point. I'm enjoying watching him, and that's about all I've got.
Yeah, I agree. I'm pumping the brakes on Zalal a little bit, but there's some potential there. Let's get to some of the awards. The UFC awards were the performance bonuses went to Kay Hansen and Julian Arosa. I think they both were great selections. And the fight of the night, no-brainer, Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Let's get to our awards as we've covered all the fights. Would you like to do the Bulls and the Bears, or would you like to do the cut list?
Let's start with the cut list. Just get the bad news out of the way first, then we can move on to the fun.
The way we have the cut list, we have one of us will nominate a fighter that should be released from the UFC, and we don't mean this in a mean way. It sucks to have to cut someone, but that actually opens the doors for other people. So it's kind of like, two-sided coin. If one of us nominates, we both have to agree. So you seemed eager to cut somebody. So who? I'm assuming we both have the same person in mind.
I've got two, so you could even go first, and probably I'd all
right, I will nominate John Vellante. I mean, the guy's lost. I don't even know how many losses in a row. Let me pull it up right now. He has lost
4 of 6.
4
2
of
straight.
6. Wow, really? Wow. Oh, he beat Ed Herman. I forgot about the guy. I completely.
We all forgot about the Ed Herman.
I completely. How could I block out the Ed Herman John Vellante showdown? He's lost 2 in a row. I just feel like he's gonna go into like a diabetic coma if we see him back in action. Is John Vellante on your 2-fighter list?
Yeah, he's one of them. I mean, I don't even know if you need to put somebody on the cut list who fights less than once a year, to the point that like it's actually surprising when you hear his name. But if there needs to be one, he should be on it. He didn't show anything to indicate he's going to have a second life at heavyweight.
All right, so let's hear your second nomination.
Mickey Gall.
Really? Mickey Gall? Oh, man. Do I agree with that? Do I?
Well, let me make the case here. Since Mickey Gall has come to the UFC, he is 5-3. He has beaten Salim Touari, who is out of the UFC. He's beaten George Sullivan, who is out of the UFC. Sage Northcutt, who is out of the UFC. Phil Brooks, who is out of the UFC. And Mike Jackson, who is out of the UFC, but directly outside the cage taking great pictures.
But
like he is literally the cutoff line between whether you belong in the UFC or not.
All right. So I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to keep him in. And the reason why, I'm going to give you 2 reasons. Number 1, he was in the co-main event. I don't know if that really means much, but he was in the co-main event. So, but number 1 reason, you said all these fighters that he beat that is no longer in the UFC. But he did beat somebody who's 0-1, Ron Templeton, who could still turn around and make it to the UFC. So, for that alone, I say keep Mickey.
Here's an interesting hypothetical. He was snatched up, at 1-0 with, Dana White and the Looking for a Fight crew there, scouting an opponent for CM Punk. And we've already talked about the efforts the UFC had to make to justify there being a 1-0 guy on roster. Well, he's a grappling wizard. He's the human anaconda or whatever. That was the worst thing that could have happened to him. He needed reps. He needed seasoning. If they had not come, he probably, because he's been in the UFC for 4 years now.
Jeez.
Think about that. You want something else crazy? He and Mike Perry are the same age. They're like 3 months apart in age. They looked 10 years apart. Anyway.
Well, in all fairness, though, like Mike Perry did like 7 years in prison, so that aged him.
But I mean, if he had not been picked up 4 years ago, instead of 8 fights in the last 4 years, he probably would have gotten signed to the UFC like 2 years ago, and he'd be like probably 13-1 out of CFFC or something, and would be a much better fighter. He would have been a much better fighter when he made the jump to the UFC, and he'd be a better fighter today. Getting signed to the UFC was the worst thing that happened to him.
Yeah, you've convinced me. He's all right. We're cutting him, but with a rule, like if he gets cut, he automatically has to be signed by Bellator immediately because he just fits Bellator. He just fits Bellator.
Hey, I want to see Gall versus Dylan Dennis. Like, show me that grappling wizardry.
Yeah.
Or he probably punches Dennis in the snot box and like TKO some, but
yeah. All right, let's go on to the Bulls and the Bears. The Bulls and the Bears, if you're not familiar with it, is a stock market reference. Bulls is when the market is going up. Bears when it's going down. We'll do our 3. I will go first. My number 3 Bull. So this is a good thing. I'm going Tanner Bozier. I think everything he did between the KO, the call out, the interview, it was just an absolute perfect night. I love that he called out the bonus. He's like, well, I should also get a little extra bonus because you don't have to pay PFL champion Felipe Lins his bonus, meaning like Felipe has a inflated salary. So, I just like Tanner Bozier. He also dropped a wicked during his interview. He's not from New England, but we will welcome him in the New England family if he wants to join. My number 2 Bull, Kay Hansen, 20 years old, beats an Invicta champion in her UFC debut on a week's notice and a sub of the year candidate in her first UFC fight. Kay Hansen gets a tweet from Ronda Rousey. But my number 1, and this is the reason why I wanted to go first, because I was worried if Ben would steal it. Latori Gonzalez, the corner woman of Mike Perry. She has a perfect record as a corner woman in the UFC. Give me Latori Gonzalez as my number 1 winner of the night. Latori Gonzalez.
Wow. All right, for Bulls. Sometimes we do people, sometimes we do things. This time, my Bulls are all things. Bull number 1, Omoplatas, Night of the Omoplata. Now, I've been watching the sport long enough that, I remember when this was a completely novel thing in MMA. It had been a thing in grappling forever, but it was new enough to MMA that Joe Rogan would just lose his shit whenever anyone even tried one. I was somewhat biased against them from the start because the first time I saw someone try one in a UFC fight, it was Anthony Hardonk on Frank Mir. Now, I like Hardonk. I thought he always seemed like a pretty cool dude, good striker. But if you want to try to unveil your developing ground game and try out an omoplata, trying it on Frank fucking Mir is not the way to unveil that. And Mir ended up grabbing a Kimura and like corkscrewing him into himself like 540 degrees about 30 seconds later. Nonetheless, it is a proven effective technique, and not just for the ultra long-limbed Ben Saunders of the world anymore. 3 omoplatas were attempted on Saturday night. All 3 worked. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. Forced the other fighter to react and escape, and were used to sweep or reverse position. So, bull, omoplata.
I think the UFC should have gave Maurice Green an omoplata. Just said victory by omoplata. Just throw it in there.
we need one on the record.
I love how now we're in the Twister world. When Bryce Mitchell gets twisted, we all go crazy. But if you go to a high school wrestling tournament, you'll see 50 of them at any tournament.
And they call it a guillotine? Yeah.
Yeah, they call it a guillotine. It happens. It happens. I remember the first time they made a big deal about the twister, and I was like, that happens all the time.
Yeah. I've had it done on me once or twice. Yeah. All right. Bull number 2, youth. The younger fighter did not win in all the fights, but a couple of notably young fighters really showed out. And in the case of our curtain jerker, Yusuf Zalal, he looked and fought like a young fighter. Plenty of spring in his step, plenty of gas in the tank. Extra gas in the tank is what won him the fight, basically, because it was anyone's fight going into the last round. Then, Kay Hansen, now the second youngest fighter in the UFC, youngest woman in the UFC, second youngest woman in the history of the UFC after when Macy Barber debuted. And she pulled off a submission of the year candidate to win a fight that was still very much up in the air in the third round, a fight that I had not favored her to win. But here's to youth, being that young and not having the pressure of being undefeated on her. She was willing to just try something really cool, and it could not have worked out better for her. Final bull.
So just to contrast that bull, it's nice to see the youth win, because a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you remember, I threw the old men in because we had the night when I think it was Arlovsky, Rothwell, and Teixeira all won the same night. So yeah, I like that pick.
And bull number 3, a few extra pounds. So the fight between Sean Woodson and Julian Erosa, and I had the kind of idea, I was starting to feel this, but I will give it to Sherdog's resident statman, associate editor Jay Petrie, for throwing out the actual numbers. Of the last 6 catchweight fights in UFC events, that is the 5th out of 6 in which at least the winner has gotten the post-fight bonus. So not making those guys cut that extra 5 pounds maybe just gives them a little more gas, a little more chin, a little more pep in their step, but it looks like we get better fights out of it. Yeah. So hooray for a few extra pounds. Oh, damn.
Sorry, I can't resist.
And, so hooray for catchweights, at least especially during this time when, again, fighters' training situations are who knows what.
That's a great stat. That's a nice job, Jay.
Yeah.
That's a great stat. Let's go over to our Bears. Oh, sorry.
Let me do the first bear, because it's kind of a continuation.
Go ahead. All right. Go ahead.
First bear is, if the last bull was a few extra pounds, the first bear is a lot of extra pounds. Fighters carrying a lot of extra pounds did not do so well. We have already talked about John Volante. Just some former light heavyweights look like a new man at heavyweight. Not being sexist there. I mean, if we have any female light heavyweights out there who moved to heavyweight, let me see them. Get at me with the photos. But he was not one of them. Did not look like he had a new lease on life. He looked slow, looked sluggish, terrible gas. Also, going back to the Hansen versus Fry fight, Jinyu Fry is an atomweight. At atomweight, she has just the physical strength and size to do what she wants, because she wants a medium speed, measured kickboxing game from outside that does not expose her to undue risk. And there aren't really many fighters who can force her to do otherwise. Mina Grusander tried for 10 rounds, and Grusander is a grinder. I assume that Grusander means grinder and finish, and wasn't really able to do it to her for extended periods. Hansen is a strawweight. She's a strawweight who looks like, it's a cut for her to make strawweight. She is a physical brute, and she was able to force Fry out of the game she wanted. So bear is a lot of extra pounds. And that's my only real bear I had tonight.
Yeah. And, Luis Pena, Mickey Gall, other fighters that recently moved up in weight, both also lost. I like that. I like how you played off of that. Nice job.
Thank you.
My number 3, Luis Pena, just a really big disappointment. He was a big favorite and he came up short. My number 2, I'm going to go Felipe Lenz and the PFL. And your PFL champion is now 0-2 in the UFC. Lost to Andre Arlovsky, and they got knocked out by Tanner Boja. Not looking good when your top heavyweight can't even crack the top 15. But my number 1, not a guy I expect to be on the list, but Sean Woodson. Also, Glory MMA. There was 2 fighters from Glory MMA. I think who the other one was? Was it Jason Witt? Yeah, back-to-back losses for them. Not a good night for Sean Woodson and his team, Glory MMA. So there are my Bears. Let's get to the grade. What did you grade the entire card overall?
I'm going to give this one an A. It is possibly my favorite UFC card of the year so far. It's definitely up there, but yeah, this one gets an A.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it had everything between the crazy submissions, the come from behind, upset, big dogs, one corner woman, a fight of the year candidate. Like, it had everything. It was a, I don't know, like a roller derby tournament. Like you keep watching, but you don't know why. Yeah, absolutely. I give it an A. There you guys have it. We have done the entire card. We believe it's the most comprehensive recap there is, I should say. Guys, we'll be back. There's actually a week off in between UFCs for Independence Day. So if you celebrate Independence Day here in America, 4th of July, happy 4th of July. Also, Canada Day comes up in a couple of days. My wife is Canadian, and all my in-laws, so happy Canada Day. If you guys listen, you're from the Great North, happy Canada Day. If there's any other holidays, like I don't know if there's Sweden has a holiday or Uzbekistan or something. If anybody else has a holiday between now and our next taping, happy whatever holiday it is for you guys. I plan on doing some really fun stuff in the network in the next 2 weeks. Hell, I'll break it right now. We're gonna do a Sherdog roundtable for UFC 251. We have a special guest, Craig Allen, is going to be doing it with us. So yeah,
beautiful.
Fun. So we'll be bringing that back. We have some other things going on. Stay locked to Loudmouth MMA and the Sherdog Radio Network, and we'll catch you guys next week. I should wait, not next week. 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
See you guys.